You step away from the MMA world for a short period of time, and things just go insane. There are so many things I want to talk about quickly before we get into the predictions. The first, of course, being the Ariel Helwani controversy and breaking the Brock Lesnar news at UFC 199, and the UFC ultimately banning him for life and taking away his credentials. And then, of course, coming back and unbanning him. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with his connections with MMA fighting and all of the major mixed martial arts media outlets playing a role there. But what it comes right down to, there's two sides to every story. And Ariel Helwani got news. He knew it was big news, and he broke it early. I thought it was great. I thought it created a buzz that led up to the, no, it won't happen. Oh, shit, it is happening. And that was fantastic. The UFC took the opinion saying, you're hurting people by doing this. People are going to get fired by doing this. We're telling you not to do this. There will be repercussions. You did it. There were repercussions. The way I look at it is the UFC is a privately owned company. They can do what they want, absolutely. Ariel Helwani, not a UFC employee. He's a reporter. He can report on the news as he sees fit. If the UFC is going to be deemed as a major sporting organization, not just some side spectacle, they need to allow people to have adverse opinions about them in the media. They need to allow the media to do what they need to do to talk about them in a manner that, we see elsewhere. Like, for example, you have the NHL trade day. It's a whole day devoted to breaking news ahead of time. And it's big. It's fantastic. People love it. It happens in all sports. We hear about trades breaking and rumors and all this stuff, and it's massive. And I really think it helped to actually build the buzz to Brock Lesnar's return. Then we saw the promo. Everybody's like, holy shit, we heard about this. This is true. This is amazing. I thought it was a really nice build-up. Unfortunately, the UFC didn't see that. Now, of course, they've rescinded the ban. Nonetheless, it really sets a bad precedence going forward. And they've done this before. They've revoked credentials before and banned people before, and it's not a good thing. And I really hope, going forward, something positive can come from this, but I really struggle to believe, with the powers that be, the way they run things, how it will change. It won't change much in the future. Additionally, Brock Lesnar returning, very cool, very interesting for UFC 200. It's a one-off thing by the looks of it, which is unfortunate. I like to see guys come back and commit to maybe taking a run if that's what he's coming back for. It gives more spectacle. I don't like the fact that he's the co-main event over two title fights. I think it's a little disrespectful to the title fights and the fighters that are being pushed down, but it's fine. Still excited. The drug issue, it's kind of there's more to it than just he's not going to be drug tested, so I'm not going to get into that at all. Obviously, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, UFC 200 main event. I think it's more suitable for UFC 200. I wasn't excited about this fight at UFC 200 being the headlining fight, but UFC 200, yeah, I'll watch the rematch, absolutely. I prefer Jones versus Cormier. I think it's a better matchup. But nonetheless, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I'm your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 89 event, which will take place in Ottawa, Canada, and feature a massive welterweight main event. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, which you can check out. You can also go over to my website and pick up the bet packs. Yes, they have not been very good. My picks have been fairly weak, but honestly, who saw Michael Bisping and Dan Henderson pulling off the upsets last weekend? That was definitely a letdown. So regardless, they weren't great. I will turn things around. I just came off a massive hot streak. We'll get on another hot streak. If you're considering buying them, if you're an American customer, keep in mind, you're not paying the price that's listed. You're paying a much smaller price because the dollar exchange. So keep that in mind. You're saving about $15-20 off of the actual price that's posted, depending on if you buy the subscription or not. Obviously, with the subscription, you can save up to maybe 2 packs for free, depending on what I post it as, or you can just buy the 1 pack for $12. Certainly get in there. Slumps come, they go, hot streaks get going, and things are fantastic. It's scary as to predict fights, but when it comes right down to it, it's 2 individuals locked in a cage beating the crap out of each other. Things can go haywire. Nonetheless, I'm very excited to be predicting these fights. They look like a fantastic lineup, so let's get to our first main card prediction. The first fight of the evening takes place in what is actually a brand new division, or it's at least a temporary division, the women's flyweight division, as the 5th-ranked strawweight fighter and former title challenger Valerie Letourneau, 8 wins, 4 losses, takes on the former number 2 ranked fighter in at least the tough tournament, and currently 12th ranked in the strawweight division, 12th ranked Joanne JoJo Calderwood, with a current record of 10 wins and 1 loss. Now, as this fight is taking place at 125 pounds, currently the UFC has expressed no interest in having a division, having a weight class here. I think they're kind of testing the water to see how things look, and I think a lot of it had to do with they were afraid of the 135 pound girls a mass exodus to leave 135 when Ronda was the champion and looked, terrifying, was beating everybody. They thought everybody would go to 125 and would leave their marquee fighter without it. But now that we've seen 2 title changes, they might think, people might not be as interested to jump ship unless it's an appropriate move. So I'm looking at this saying, maybe they are going to be going forward with the 125-pound division in the future. Calderwood is coming off a pretty solid win over a debuting fighter in Courtney Casey. It was a very tough fight, and it was the first win for JoJo after suffering the first loss of her pro career. For Letourneau, she is 2-1 fighting as a strawweight, beat Marina Moroz, who picked up the victory over Calderwood, lost to Joanne Jędrzejczyk in a 5-round decision. Held her own very well in that match. A lot of people thought she was an undeserving title challenger, but it was the most competitive fight we've seen with Joanna defending her title. Now, both girls are probably more suited for 125 pounds. Letourneau was way too small for bantamweight, and both girls, it was big cuts to get down to 115. Again, they might go back to 115, but at least this seems a little more appropriate for them. Letourneau, the Canadian, 1 inch taller. She'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and she is 2 years older. Now, looking at trouble first. BJJ purple belt, 4-1 in fights ended by knockout, 1-0 in submissions, 3-3 in fights going the distance. If you look at her 4 career losses, she has lost to high-caliber opponents, losing to both Sarah Kaufman and Alexis Davis in pro fights number 2 and 3. Welcome to the world of mixed martial arts. And then her other 2 losses, Claudia Gadelia and the aforementioned Joanne Jędrzejczyk, the 2 top fighters in the strawweight division. So she has fought high-level opposition. She did lose to Roxanne Mondafari trying to get on the Ultimate Fighter via submission, which is a little bit of hit and miss. Roxanne, a great veteran, but certainly not the caliber of the other fighters on that list. For Calderwood, BJJ blue belt, Muay Thai background, 4-0 in fights ended by knockout, 0-1 in subs, 6-0 in going the distance, and in addition to her loss to Marina Rose by submission, she was submitted by Rose Namajunas on the Ultimate Fighter. Now, JoJo, big statistics, 6.67 strikes landed per minute, very impressive. Solid striking repertoire. Right hook to the body, left hook to the chin. We also saw her land a beautiful turning side kick that hurt Courtney Casey and put her down. She rocked Casey a couple times on the feet, but you look at some of the things with JoJo that has plagued her in the past. She really struggles with her footwork and head movement at times. Si-Ho Ham had a lot of success bouncing in and out and picking, taking shots at her. JoJo gets hit a lot, 4.03 strikes absorbed per minute. She tends to get backed up at times and can get unloaded when she gets put on the cage. But when she can get to going in the clinch and use her size and leverage, she lets go of some vicious elbows, really can do a lot of damage in that position. Now for Letourneau, she's a very calculated striker, keeps her hands up, throws a nice 1-2, some very solid low kicks, will work her left hand, doubles up the right, throws a lot of fakes to set up with her hands to set up her body kick. She has a nice inside leg kick as it goes to the body as well. We'll throw some solid elbows at range. I saw her mixing a nice counter uppercut. She dropped Marla Moroz with a right hook, and again, set it up by throwing a hard body kick. Now, she does tend to get hit a lot. She took some facial damage in some earlier fights. She was rocked in a couple of her other matchups, including by Joanna, and those are things to take note of against a big hitter like JoJo. Now, one thing I want to she would take note of is when she fought Jędrzejczyk, she was catching Joanna's kicks. The first time she took it for a takedown, the other 2 times she used a close gap, hold on to it, fire that right hand, pin Joanna against the cage and work her over. And that's something with Calderwood throwing kicks. If she leaves it out there, Letourneau's going to use that to close the distance and do damage. Now, we've seen Calderwood in the past use some takedowns to turn the fight in her position. She took in her favor. She took Casey down, uses a lot of takedowns from the clinch, likes to sit in guard and just wail away and do damage. But she was submitted by Rose and Moroz off of her back, and Casey was even attacking. It seems like at times JoJo leaves a little bit too much separation, not enough heavy top pressure, and her opponents can attack off her back, and that's something that we could see here. JoJo has also had trouble pulling the trigger at times and letting her opponent be busier. We saw Letourneau, her issues with Joanna Jędrzejczyk was she had a lot of trouble with the consistent attack and the speed of Joanna. No room to fire back. I don't think that'll be an issue here. Letourneau has stopped 7 of her last 8 opponents' takedowns. For JoJo, she has landed 5 takedowns in her 2 wins. She uses it a lot to augment her striking and really control her opponent. I think Letourneau's going to defend takedown kicks. She's going to outwork Calderwood, and she's going to use her size to bully JoJo against the cage, something JoJo's not used to dealing with. JoJo, her 3 fights in the UFC have been against all debuting fighters. 2 were on short notice. She still struggled. There were lots of hype, lots of pressure coming in. I think it's a big fight. I like Valerie Letourneau's grit, and my prediction is Valerie Letourneau to defeat JoJo Calderwood by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's lightweight division as Olivier Aubin-Mercier, also known as the Quebec Kid, 8 wins, 2 losses, takes on France's Thibault GT Gouti, who has a current record of 11 wins and 1 loss. I'm probably butchering his name, unfortunately. Now, for Olivier, he's coming off his second career loss where he was thoroughly outclassed by his opponent. For Gouti, he dropped his debut via submission in just 24 seconds. It was not a memorable start to his UFC career. Now, he is fighting arguably for his roster spot after such a bad performance in his debut. Another poor performance here, he could very well get himself booted out in a division that is so deep like lightweight is. For Olivier, he might have a little bit of wiggle room considering he's, an Ultimate Fighter product. He's a Canadian fighter. He's young. He might have a little room if he loses this matchup, but hey, I wouldn't test it. Physically, the fighter from France, 1 inch taller, 2 inch reach advantage. The Canadian is 2 years younger. Now, looking at Aubin-Mercier first, he is a black belt in judo, brown belt in BJJ, and a blue belt in taekwondo. He is an absolute fantastic and capable grappler. 6 wins by submission, 5 coming by rear naked choke. He is 1-2 on the scorecards, though. For Gouti, I don't know. He comes from a boxing background. 6 wins by submission, though, which is interesting. 3 knockout victories, 2 decision victories. He has 7 first-round stoppages, and he has just 1 fight to go beyond the 3rd round. Now, what we have here, if you haven't already figured it out, is a very prominent striker versus grappler battle, despite the numbers for Thibault. Now, for Olivier Aubin-Mercier, he wants to fight on the ground. Thibault wants the fight to stay vertical. Mercier, 3.23 takedowns at a 31% completion rate. Not spectacular numbers as far as how often he completes takedowns, but if he's still landing over 3 per fight, he's getting the fight where he wants it more often than not. He does a very good job of closing distance, looks for clinches, body locks, and trips, drags the opponent to the mat, or look for him to grab that single leg, turn the corner, and simply try to drive through his opponent. When he fought David Michaud, he didn't score on the initial takedowns. His opponent is a pretty good wrestler, but what he did is he weighed on him. He hung on his waist, he chipped away at his base, kicked away at his legs, and simply tired him out, eventually put him down and got in a position where he could take his back and tap him out. Once on the mat, the French-Canadian has a smothering ground game, ties up his opponent, controls the position, breaks him down, looking for submissions, and can, as we see with his numbers with the rear naked choke totals, will work his way to back position. When you look at his takedown numbers, it's very simple how he wins fights. 11 takedowns in his 3 victories, versus just 3 in his 2 losses. And it's not surprising that his success hinges on his takedowns and how consistent he can be with them. His striking's still a little bit stiff, not very active. Arguably his kicks are his best offense, but that's not something he wants to rely upon when trying to win a fight. When he fought Diego Ferreira in his last matchup, he was landing some strikes, but again, he wants to limit his time spent in his opponent's wheelhouse in this matchup. For Gouti, he throws pretty good, crisp strikes. He has decent power. He has some pretty formidable low kicks. Nothing spectacular, but still they do the job. He works well behind his jab, will often double it up, and he has pretty good hand speed once he lets his hands go. Now, he's not an overly effective counter striker, and he tends to kind of freeze up when under pressure, which is not something here against Mercier. He's going to look to try and close it's good against Mercier because he's going to look to try and close that distance behind his strikes. When we saw in his last matchup, before he got submitted, he got hurt on the feet and dropped, ground and pound, back taken, rear naked choke, very quick tap. Fight was over very quickly. Didn't get to see much of him. And keep in mind, I said he had a lot of submission wins, but it's a lot to do with the product of competition and where he was competing out of. He has some serviceable offensive wrestling, but certainly not on the level of you want to be using at the UFC, because he was fighting in the French MMA scene in France, where there's no ground and pound. The ground game there is a different animal than what we see here in the big leagues. He has a decent sprawl, but he's the type of fighter that if you can get your hands on him after the initial defense, he kind of seems a little bit lost, and that's what OAM does well. He gets his hands on you. He doesn't put you down right away. He uses that position, chips away, and eventually puts you on the mat. As I said before, with Thibault also freezing under pressure, it's going to allow his opponent to close the distance, shoot, tie up, and just keep working until he gets the fight to the ground. I like OAM's clinch takedowns. I think that continued pressure is going to be too much for his opponent. Once he's on top, he will be in complete control here. Look for the French-Canadian to break him down, work eventually to a submission opportunity, and my prediction is Olivier Aubin-Mercier to defeat Thibault Gouti by submission. Up next, we have a matchup that you're probably not going to want to take your eyes off the TV because you might miss it. It's in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the Canadian Steve the Bosse Bosse, 11 wins and 2 losses, takes on the real OC, Sean O'Connell, with a current record of 17 wins and 7 defeats. Now, as I said, don't miss the weigh-ins here, because O'Connell always puts on an entertaining show. He's always a fun guy to watch. He does something kooky and fun. And considering he's in Canada fighting a former hockey player, it's certainly, I expect to see something that he will do with some Canadian content. Now, as I said, Bosse it's a Canadian dream. He's a former hockey enforcer, gave up the hockey aspect of his career, and he is fighting now and looking to build his career around his ability, his fisticuffs, his hands. Now, he's coming off a big KO knockout of James Tahuna. The first victory of his UFC career. He debuted at middleweight, got absolutely blasted by Thiago Santos, moved back to light heavyweight where he felt more comfortable despite being a little bit undersized, and he picked up the victory. Keep in mind, the Canadian, only 1 minute and 21 seconds of total UFC fight time, so not a lot of in-cage experience, not a lot of tape at this level to go on, but he does have a couple wins over decent, recognizable opponents. For O'Connell, he's coming off a pretty unfortunate knockout loss, KO loss to Ilir Latifi in a very short fight. It ended a 2-fight winning streak that he put together. Overall, he's 2-3 inside the octagon. O'Connell is 2 inches taller, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he is 2 years younger. It's 2s across the board for the American. Now for Bosse, he has 9 wins by knockout, 1 by submission. He has 1 decision, both of his losses coming by knockout. 1 inside the UFC, 1 outside. For O'Connell, 9 wins by KO. He also has some power. He is 3-2 in fights ended by submission, 5-1 on the scorecards. He has 4 losses by knockout on his record, including losing to Ryan Jimmo and the aforementioned monster and legend to be Ilir Latifi. Statistics. Look at the numbers for Sean O'Connell. 6.38 strikes landed per minute. That's ridiculous for light heavyweights. That's numbers you expect to see when you're looking at bantamweights and flyweights. He puts up a big number, but at the same time, 6.59 strikes absorbed per minute. Those are horrendous and astronomically high defensive numbers that it's going to shorten your career significantly. He landed 109 strikes in his loss to Gian Villante. He gave up 100 in his knockout win over Van Buren, which did not go the distance. He is a stand and bang guy, and let's see who's still standing after the fists meet the chins. He likes to press forward. He has a big right hand. Again, keeps coming forward and trying to put his opponent away. Against Van Buren, he was breaking down. He was taking a lot of damage. I think he was losing that fight until he got the 3rd round stoppage. One thing to keep an eye on there, he was getting controlled by the larger man in that fight in the clinch, and Van Buren was brutalizing with knees to the body. Hurt him a couple of times. Was slowing him down, but not enough, obviously, to get the victory. He put Van Buren down with a beautiful right hand. He just kept throwing, landed uppercuts, swarmed him with big strikes, got a standing stoppage. Couldn't knock him out, but the referee had seen enough. That was impressive. When he fought Latifi, he got stunned with a big right hand, absolutely KO'd. Similar against Ryan Jimmo, he walked into a big shot late in that first round, I believe it was, and put down. When you look at his knockout numbers, or knockout wins in the UFC, they're impressive. You're knocking guys up at this level. But the 2 guys he's knocked in the UFC have a combined 10 losses by knockout. Anthony Peroche has been knocked out 7 times. Van Buren's been knocked out 3 times. Certainly, that leads you to believe they're guys that are predisposed to getting KO'd. For Bosse, he has significant power. Big striker. He's got, he's a brawler. Throws everything very hard. Relies primarily on his boxing. He throws a right and a left. He has very solid strikes. Power right for the knockout of James Tahuna. Quick combinations. Pretty good hand speed. I said nice straight right hand will slip in there. Knees in the clinch as well. Watch for that, as I mentioned above, that O'Connell's been a little bit willing to sit and trade in that position, and that's something that Bosse could take advantage of. Now again, Bosse, he tends to be a little bit hittable. He leaves some openings at times, but he feels for the most part, other than the Thiago Santos fight, his chin's going to hold up against his power. He got hit with a brutal head kick there. It probably would have stopped a Mack truck had it hit that instead. And keep in mind the weight cut the Bosse experienced getting into middleweight, it could have taken away from his durability. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see how he fares against light heavyweights at this level. Keep in mind, all of Bosse's KOs have come in the first round. He has just 3 fights out of the opening round, so he's the type of guy it's pretty much one and done. He has had success going beyond, but not much. He can be taken down, might be something O'Connell looks to exploit. Both guys like to exchange. I anticipate that is where this fight is going to play out. O'Connell, I think he's way too willing to get hit. I think the speed and power both favor the Canadian here. I think he's going to land some quick combinations and with brutal power. But I think he lands something during an early exchange, catches O'Connell coming forward, and my prediction is Steve Bosse to defeat Sean O'Connell by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, it's a welterweight matchup between Donald the Cowboy Cerrone, former lightweight title challenger, 29 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest, taking on the Predator Patrick Cote, 24 wins and 9 defeats. He is a former middleweight title challenger. Now, it's a huge fight for 2 fighters from different divisions trying to find or establish a foothold as welterweights. Cote, though, 5-1. He's well on his way. His only loss coming to the man who's fighting in the main event and could be fighting for the title in the not-too-distant future, Stephen Thompson. He's currently on a 3-fight winning streak with pretty sizable knockouts of both Ben Saunders and Josh Berkman. He's been kind of cleaning up that senior tour, adding Joe Riggs in there as well. Now he's fighting a guy a little bit younger in Donald Cerrone. For Cerrone, 8-fight, look what he's done recently. He had an 8-fight winning streak, snapped in his title fight loss against Rafael dos Anjos. Actually, that 8-fight winning streak was sandwiched on either end by losses to the current lightweight champion. He submitted Alex Oliveira in his welterweight debut in pretty damn impressive fashion. Physically, Cerrone, despite being a former lightweight, 2 inches taller, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he is 3 years younger. Now, put this in perspective. I said Cerrone is a former lightweight. Patrick Cote, on one of the first events I saw, and yes, I didn't start at the beginning, but one of the very first events I ever saw, Patrick Cote fought Tito Ortiz at light heavyweight on short notice. That's pretty impressive. So we have a former light heavyweight, a guy who spent a little bit of time in light heavyweight, and more importantly, middleweight, taking on a former lightweight. Now, Cote, we know what he's all about. He has some pretty good power. 10 wins by knockout. 3-3 in fights ended by submission. 9-5 on the scorecards. He has 1 KO loss, which came in the middleweight title fight against Anderson Silva, so it was due to injury. And, of course, we saw Alessio Sakara, that win by DQ, where he nailed the Canadian with some illegal elbows and certainly hurt him, but he is known for his iron chin. For Cerrone, 5 wins by knockout, 16-1 in fights that go the distance. 16-1 in fights ended by submission, 8-4 in fights that go the distance. He has 2 losses by KO, or by knockout, TKO. Both are related to body kicks to Anthony Pettis and Rafael dos Anjos, both UFC championship fighters. For Cerrone, Cowboy tends to be a notorious slow starter. Didn't get out of the gates at all against Dos Anjos, was very much on the defensive early against Alexander Oliveira. When you go back to the other RDA matchup, he struggled early, and Dos Anjos got ahead of him and kept going, and Cerrone really didn't get any momentum going to later in that matchup. Same thing with Nate Diaz, so he has issues being a slow starter. He is an exceptionally lethal Muay Thai striker. Hard kicks, exceptionally dangerous knees. I use that word a lot because he's an exceptional fighter. Good combinations, works very well at range. The front kick to the body is a weapon he really deploys well. We saw him use it against Jim Miller, hurt him several times, including what was mistakenly believed to be a low blow. It was so effective, landed perfectly, but clearly not a low strike. A lot of good head kicks. Again, when he stopped Miller, he used that body kick to set up the head kick. Miller had no choice but to cover up down low. Boom, hits him with a head kick. Fight over. The other thing he does very well, that stepping knee. It's a brutalizing stepping knee. He uses it as a counter for opponents who like to come forward, and if he can land it, it can do a lot of damage, whether it's beat to the chin, more likely to the midsection and the solar plexus, if you will. And it stops a lot of that forward pressure. But we have the issues, in addition to being a slow starter, he's had pressure with opponents who push him back and use a lot of pressure. He struggled early on with the boxing of Eddie Alvarez. He struggled continuously with the boxing of Nate Diaz in that fight. Against Jim Miller, he was getting cracked routinely with the right hand, got countered as he came in. He got rocked by Rafael dos Anjos, so the same thing with the right hand. He tends to hold his left hand a little bit low, and he needs to clean that up. For Cote, he does have a Muay Thai background, but he's known more as a power puncher. He is much less reckless of late, more technical, takes less risks. For a while, everybody's saying, well, it leads to less knockouts. Well, his last 2 fights have been pretty darn impressive knockouts against Saunders and against Josh Berkman in pretty good fights. When he fought Joe Riggs, he used a lot of pressure. He came forward and beat him up pretty good and kept attacking. He has good power in his overhand right. Hard inside leg kicks, but again, with Cerrone, you probably don't want to exchange leg kicks. He'll use long punches at distance to close that gap behind, unload with short punches in close. When he stopped Ben Saunders, it was a sequence of uppercuts that really put him on his backside. Against Josh Berkman, he was rocked. He got cracked with a big shot. Berkman has some decent power, but we saw Cote cover up, and then he started unloading, and he eventually put Berkman down with a brutal right, the first man to ever stop Josh Berkman via strikes. Now, Cote said he's known for having an iron jaw. He was hurt bad by Sakara. He was rocked by Stephen Thompson, and that was an area where he couldn't close the gap effectively, couldn't deal with the wide variety of strikes that Thompson had to offer, and we've seen other, for example, Johnny Hendricks have a lot of issues with that. When he fought Saunders, a very tall and lanky fighter, he was taken down by him, caught off balance, but again, he attacked off his back, got back up. That's an area that a lot of people won't anticipate having a big role of the ground game in this matchup. I think it could. He needs to be very careful. Cote does if he goes to the mat with Donald Cerrone. But we have seen Cerrone at times. He was taken down by Jim Miller. He attacked off his back, got back up. But I don't like the way he was bullied along the cage by Alexander Oliveira. But again, we saw him use his improving wrestling, took Oliveira down, beautifully setting up a mounted triangle to finish that matchup. Something to keep in mind here with Cerrone moving up to lightweight. Some of the advantages, that long reach and length he loved at lightweight, is gone. It's minimized here. Could be thicker, a little bit sluggish. The speed disappears a little bit. It's not always a good thing to go up in weight, and that's one thing. And when he fought Oliveira was also a lightweight moving up to welterweight, so it's not exactly like he was getting a true test against a big welterweight. Look for Patrick Cote in this matchup to push the pace early, keep Cerrone backing up, shut down the kicks with his pressure and ability to brawl. Land that big right hand, kind of bully him along the cage. Never give him room. Really make it an ugly fight. Cerrone's now, either in a lot of his fights where he wins, he either has to stop his opponent or hurt them to turn the fight in his direction. Cote is very tough to finish. Not impossible, I don't think, especially by submission, but I think Cote will avoid that turning point. keep coming forward. And my prediction is Patrick Cote to defeat Donald Cerrone by decision. Moving now to the main event of the evening, we are in the UFC's welterweight division. As the former title challenger, the number 1 ranked Rory Red King MacDonald of Canada, 18 wins and 3 losses, takes on a hopeful title challenger, the number 2 ranked Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with a current record of 12 wins and 1 loss. Ooh, this is a good fight. Now Thompson, he most likely gets a shot at the title, even though he's disgruntled, and there are guys like Damian Maia who's angling for a shot, and Tyron Woodley currently has the shot. Thompson most likely gets the next shot if he wins this fight, is the way I see it. And for Rory, I don't see them putting him back in the cage with Lawler, considering he's lost twice, but he does hold his number 1 position. He's not that far off from a shot, and especially if Lawler loses the fight, especially if he loses to Tyron Woodley, who is a fighter that Rory has defeated pretty soundly, Rory maintains a spot and line for a shot at the title. Rory, his 2 losses in his last 10 fights have come against the aforementioned Robbie Lawler. He lost a split decision fight, was very close, and he lost a matchup in the 5th round via knockout with the title on the line. It was a classic, my fight of the year last year, in a fight that Rory was actually ahead in on the judges' scorecards before he got finished. He has impressive wins over the aforementioned Damian Maia and Tyron Woodley during his current run, showing how good he is taking out top guys. Can he add Thompson to that list? For Stephen Thompson, a 6-fight winning streak since his first career loss, which came in a gritty fight against another fighter who was climbing the ranks in Matt Brown. He is coming off a very impressive victory, a first-round stoppage win over the aforementioned, no, I guess I didn't mention him already. I used that too much, against Johnny Big Rig Hendricks, former title holder. Physically, both men are 6 feet tall, 1-inch reach advantage for Rory Mack. He is 6 years younger. Keep in mind, MacDonald has been out of action for 11 months. Thompson actually fought the day after Rory lost to Robbie Lawler, and then fought again in early 2016 against Big Rig. The aforementioned Big Rig, that's when it applies. Now, what we have here, we have 2 fighters coming from very different backgrounds. For Rory, he is a mixed martial arts trained fighter. He's a guy who trained in all aspects. He didn't come from 1 or 2 specific disciplines. He's a guy who's trained, he's very young, he was brought up in the sport, he's trained and developed everything together. For Thompson, he comes from specific disciplines, karate and kickboxing most specifically, and then he's translated that to mixed martial arts and had a heck of a lot of success doing so. Win totals. Thompson, 12 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission, 4-1 on the scorecards. For Rory MacDonald, he is 7-2 in fights ended by knockout, losing to Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit in his UFC debut in both those disappointing losses, final round stoppages in fights that he was winning. So very tough losses to deal with. 6-0 in fights ended by submission, 5-1 on the scorecards. Big aspect of this fight is distance management. Who manages it better? Who can land and avoid damage more frequently? Who can be the more impactful striker? Both guys play that game very well. It's going to be very interesting to see who gets the better of it in this fight. Statistically, very close strikes absorbed per minute, right around the mid to high 2s. I think Rory has a bit better numbers there. Not by much, though. But for Wonderboy, he lands almost 1 more strike per minute offensively than Rory does, but keep in mind Rory's been doing it against higher level opposition more consistently, so that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the numbers. Thompson, he has that karate stance, very well known for it. He is a switch stance fighter. He's constantly changing his offensive front or defensive front, depending on what he's about to do. Holds his hands low, which is something that it's his style and he gets away with it, and we're not one to correct when you're having that much success. Very quick, leaping in, closing that distance. He's hard to time because he mixes things up very well. As I said, he manages distance exceptionally well. He fights very long, throws from a variety of angles, and simply put, he throws a variety of offensive weapons, and that variety gives opponents so much to think about. You can see Johnny Hendricks thinking, he just hit me with this, okay, and boom, he hits him with something else, and it's just like, wow, what's this guy throwing next? He mixed it up so well. He has a ton. His kicking arsenal is so impressive. Back power, leg kicks, round kicks, front leg kicks, spinning back kick, what he dropped. I think it was a spinning wheel kick, which he dropped Jake Ellenberger with. Turning side kick against Hendricks was just furious. It looked like he was trying to kick right through him when he had him against the cage, which led to the eventual finish. He also, with his hands, single punches. He gets a lot of power, moves away, and then boom, powers in with a nice straight left, quick jab. He had a right hand to drop Patrick Cote, put down Robert Whittaker, who's a fighter at middleweight, who's on a roll as well. He landed a big right to rock Johnny Hendricks. He lets those big kicks go, especially if you have nowhere to go and can't move those strikes. Those kicks are going to do serious damage. His long range, the way you look at Stephen Thompson, his long range weapons keep you back. His movement makes it hard to close the distance, and his counters make it even harder once you get in there to not take damage. Additionally, that takedown game, we saw Matt Brown have success with it, but he is very hard to take off his feet. Johnny Hendricks, who's a very accomplished wrestler, took George St. Pierre down multiple times, got in on his hips, and could not put him down. 80% takedown defense for Wonder Boy. Now for Rory, the Canadian Wonder Boy, if you will. Likes to sit and measure fighters exceptionally well at setting up his strikes. Good distance management. Slips back to limit the impact of his opponent's strikes and then moves forward back into range where he feels comfortable. Hard body kicks, a nice straight right he'll slip in as well. He is at his best when he's letting his weapons go. And that barrage that nearly finished Robbie Lawler near the end of the 4th round, I believe it was, he was throwing punches, elbows, knees, short kicks to the midsection that were digging in that had Robbie dropping his elbows down to try and cover up and then opening up his head for shots. It was an exceptional barrage that would have finished many, many lesser men than the current champion and the ruthless one. Rory benefits when he can get his opponent to hesitate. We saw him pressure and unload and just destroy Tyrone Woodley. Didn't finish him, but it was an impressive performance. Similar against Damian Maia, to a lesser extent, he did the same thing against Tarek Safin, eventually knocking him out. But because he can force his opponent not to fire back and set up his strikes, he's that much more effective. They freeze under pressure and he goes to work. One thing with Rory and Faraz Sahabi as cornerman, they are great strategic fighters, constantly making changes. You can see against Woodley, his goal was to pressure and be in his face. Against Lawler, it was sit back a little bit, look to counter, land strikes, but don't take too much damage. It's a 5-round fight. And that's something he'll probably come up with a strategy against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that he feels is most effective to deal with what he has to offer. But against Robbie Lawler, he took a ton of damage in that matchup, and he eventually got finished. With Lawler, he really didn't have Lawler in much trouble, I don't think, until the 4th round. He had piled up so much damage, and eventually Lawler started to wilt a little bit. He doesn't have that one-punch knockout power where I think Thompson does, the one-strike knockout power. Keep in mind, though, the familiarity that Faraz has having trained Stephen Thompson is certainly going to be good for Rory. It's going to give him some added insight. But on the other side of things, you have this post-title fight letdown for Rory MacDonald. He has now lost twice to the man that currently holds the title. That is a tough scenario to come off of because it's hard to get motivated knowing you're in a situation that even if you win this fight, you're probably going to need 2 or 3 more victories to get a shot at the title. Currently, and he also coming off a layoff, which is almost a year, versus a hungry title challenger in Stephen Thompson. He wants his shot. His clock is ticking. He's 33 years old. He knows he is close to the top. He's not there yet. This win would put him right on the cusp. I think Thompson is going to keep Rory on the outside. He's going to land those kicks. He's going to punish Rory once he comes in. He's not going to hesitate. He's going to be the aggressor. He's going to pile up the damage on Rory MacDonald, and I think eventually he's going to land something significant. He's going to keep Rory guessing, and Rory is not going to be used to a fighter that has a larger variety of offensive weapons to attack him with. I think Rory's going to shoot for some takedowns. It's just like against Robbie. It's not going to be there for him. Thompson will punish him as he comes in, and my prediction is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to defeat Rory MacDonald. And it's not going to make a lot of Canadians, and I'm sorry, my fellow Canadians, it's not going to make a lot of Canadians happy, but Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to defeat Rory MacDonald in via TKO, in which should be a fairly fantastic fight. God, that was a long breakdown. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 89. Very much looking forward to all of my preliminary picks will be available at Kamikaze Overdrive.net. There's some very good prelim matchups. This is a very good card overall for a Canadian card, despite the fact that, people sometimes don't look at these cards as good shows worth watching. I'm very much looking forward to it. The last Fight Night 88 was also an awesome card, and of course UFC 199 was fantastic. So we've had a lot of momentum, and we're heading towards UFC 200. I am going to try my best for July. Obviously, I'm going to do predictions for every single fight available. My goal is to get all the fights done leading up to UFC 200, and if I can work it out, I will try and get back into the studio to do a studio show for UFC 200. It's so difficult with all that, but I feel it warrants it if I can get the job done, because we have a little bit of a layoff after the show. I will do my best. Thanks for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Follow me on Facebook as well. Check over and head out the website. That's not right. Head over and check out the website. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you after the bell.